Hello class, today we're going to be creating our first montage using Photoshop. I have Adobe Photoshop CC 2019 running for this tutorial. If you have something earlier, don't worry about it, but your space might look slightly different than mine. Okay, so I'm going to open up Photoshop after downloading my exercise files, and I'm going to press Open, and in my exercise files, I'm going to access the JPEG called Mask Demo 3. If for some reason you're not seeing that JPEG and you're still just seeing a zip, make sure you go to that zip file before opening and double click it so that it unzips and shows you the 3 JPEGs for this exercise. Okay, I'll start with maskdemo3.jpg. And now we're in our Photoshop workspace. I'm going to go over the workspace really quickly so that you understand what we're working with. On the left side of our screen, we're going to see our toolbar. Your toolbar might be in 1 column, but I tend to keep mine in 2-column mode. You can change the mode by clicking on the double arrows in the upper left corner of your Photoshop toolbar. On the right side of our workspace, we have all of our windows. If your workspace looks a little different than mine, you can either close windows or tabs, or you can go up to your window menu, select Workspace, and select Essentials or Reset Essentials. In the center of our workspace, we see a canvas. I'm going to zoom in on my canvas. You can zoom in using Command+ if you have a Mac, Control+ if you have a PC, Z for zoom, or I'm just going to use my trackpad and zoom in here. The first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be adjusting this image. We're going to adjust it by using our crop tool. C is the shortcut key for crop, but you can find the crop tool here in the toolbar. Once you have your crop tool open, you can simply drag the edges to eliminate this white space. Press Return on your keyboard, and that will set the transformation. You'll notice as you're making changes that the canvas that you're seeing here is reflective of the thumbnail that you're seeing here in your Layers window. We're going to rename this background layer by double-clicking on the text for background and typing in a new layer. We're going to call this layer Mountains. And we're going to get into the habit of labeling all of our layers so that it's easy to navigate through our Layers window. What we're going to be doing to this Mountains layer is we're going to be hiding that reflection that we're seeing at the bottom of the image. Because there was some plastic in front of the painting when I took the picture, it cut some of my reflection, and I'm going to hide it. To do that, we're actually going to create another layer that's visible below the Mountains layer. I'm going to go to the bottom of my Layers panel here. I'm going to find the third icon in, which is my Add Layer. Oh, I'm sorry, not the third icon. The second to last icon in for creating a new layer. I'm going to click on that one time, and I'm going to see a Layer 1 appear in my Layers window. Layer 1, if I look at the thumbnail, has a gray and white grid in it. And that gray and white grid means that Layer 1 is currently transparent. And actually, we want that layer to be white. So I'm going to keep that layer selected. And by default, when you create a layer, it becomes selected. But to select things, you just click on them. So I'm just going to click to select this Layer 1. And I'm going to navigate to my Edit menu. Select Fill, and from my Fill dialog box, within the Contents area, I'm going to click on this drop-down menu, and I'm going to find White. I'll say OK. And I can now see that my Layer 1 is filled with white pixels. I'm going to rename this Layer 1 White. To rename things, just double-click on the name, and then type in the new title. Press Return to exit out of that text box. Because our layer that is white is above our mountains layer. And because this layer is fully transparent, fully opaque, meaning we don't see through any of the pixels, this white layer is hiding the mountains layer. So let's rearrange these layers so I'm actually seeing the mountains layer. To rearrange things, you simply grab the layer that you want to move and drag it to the position you want it placed. Notice that you'll get a little blue highlight telling you that if you release your mouse now, the layer is going to be moved to that place. Okay, so I'll just rearrange so that my mountains layer is at the top and my white layer is below. And now what we're going to do is we're going to make some changes to our mountains layer so that that reflection is hidden. And then we're going to create a white mist that exists on the lower half of this image. To do this, we're going to be using a tool called a mask. So keeping our mountains layer selected, I'm going to navigate down to the bottom of my layers window. I'm going to select Add Layer Mask. It's the third icon from the left side, white rectangle, black circle. I'll click on that one time and I'll see a new white thumbnail appear next to the thumbnail of my mountains layer. This new thumbnail is actually indicating that this layer has a mask on it. Masks will make the most sense once you get some practice in using Photoshop, but what masks actually do is they determine which pixels in this layer are going to be transparent. Right now, all of our pixels have what we call 100% opacity, so you're getting a solid white mask. If I started painting with a black paintbrush or adding black pixels to my mask, what would happen is some of the pixels of my mountains layer would become transparent, meaning I won't be able to see them. So keeping this mask selected, what we're going to be doing is painting with a black paintbrush onto what's actually happening is we'll be painting onto the mask, but we'll be using the canvas to do that. Okay, so what we need right now is a brush. Press B on your keyboard to access the brush tool. And I like using the shortcut key because when you're new to Photoshop, there are actually a couple of different tools on here that kind of look like brushes. Okay, so B for brush. And then at the top of our workspace here, this horizontal bar above our canvas has all of our tool settings. These settings are going to change based on the tool you have selected. So with the brush tool selected, I'm going to navigate to this far left-hand side where I'm seeing this number with a tiny circle over it. That number is the width of my brush in pixels, and then the icon is actually the shape of my brush. If I want to change some of these brush settings, I can click on this tiny arrow just to the right, and I'll get a little flyout menu for my brush settings. I'm going to paint with a brush that's 300 pixels, so I'm going to use this slider, and I'll adjust this brush to be close to 300, maybe not exact, and then I'm going to leave my hardness at 0%. Now I'm going to demonstrate something really quick that you guys don't need to paint. I'm going to demonstrate what it means to adjust the hardness of a brush. So at 0%, this is what my white paintbrush looks like. At 100%, this is what that same brush looks like. So it's a pretty dramatic difference between a 0% hardness and a 100% hardness. And that's referencing the edge of the brush. So on the left at 0% hardness, it's a soft brush. On the right, we have a hard-edged brush. So that's what hardness is indicating. And those brushes were the same size, 300 pixels. So you don't need to do that. I just like demonstrating that so students better understand what's happening with that hardness feature. If for some reason you're seeing an icon that indicates that your brush shape isn't round, this is the same place that you can find just soft round brushes. So make sure that you have a round brush before you make your adjustments. Okay, so I have a round brush that has a 0% hardness, 300 pixels wide. I would double check and make sure that the other settings for your brush are correct. A brush mode of normal, opacity of 100%, flow of 100%, and smoothing of 10%. Okay? At 100%, my brush is going to kind of paint away the pixels pretty powerfully. But first I want to just double check a couple of things. I want to make sure that my brush is black. Okay, oops. And to make sure that's black, you can always just toggle by pressing X on the keyboard. Or if you're not sure what the foreground and background colors are here, you can click on the tiny swatches in the lower left corner, and that will set these to black and white. These swatches down here are the foreground and background swatches. The swatch that looks like it's in the foreground is the foreground swatch. The swatch that looks like it's in the background is the background swatch. Know that brushes paint with the foreground swatch. So when you have a brush tool selected, you're always sort of looking back to these swatches to make sure it's going to be painting with the right color. So I'm going to make sure that I have a black swatch here. You can click on these double arrows to the upper right, or you can press X on your keyboard and you can toggle between these colors. So I have a black paintbrush, and then I look over here and double check that I have the mask thumbnail selected, and the mask is white. Okay, so what I'll do is I'm going to do a really quick brush stroke over my reflection. Not a big brush stroke, just a little swipe across that reflection. And then I'm going to go up to my brush settings. I'm going to bring my opacity down to 20 or 30%. And I'm going to brush the rest of the scene with a really soft brush to blend in that white space that we just developed. Okay, and you can click to just add the brush strokes in small areas, or you can click and drag to brush over larger areas. I would just say don't scribble with the brush. Know that every brush stroke is going to be adding transparency. So every time you hold your mouse down and release, hold your mouse down and release. Okay, if you feel like you've overpainted and it's looking too white or a little messy, press X, you'll get a white paintbrush, and you can paint some of these pixels back into view. You can also toy with your opacity if you want really, really subtle brush adjustments. So the lower the opacity, the more subtle the change will be as you brush over it. And I'm just trying to make a really smooth, misty space at the bottom here. I think this looks pretty good. What we're seeing behind our mountains layer is that white layer. So if you'll notice that our mask on our mountains layer is black and gray at the bottom, so what we're seeing, because black and gray of a mask is making the pixels of this mountains layer transparent, what we see is the white below. Okay. Let's move on and let's add something to our foreground to hide that mistiness. I'm going to navigate up to my File menu. I'm going to select Place Linked. I'm going to find my mask demo 2.jpg. That will place my JPEG into my canvas. I'm going to be scaling this. Now I have CC19, so when I drag the corners, it's going to scale. If you have an earlier version of Photoshop, you need to hold Shift while dragging these corners diagonally. Press Return to set this transformation for this new layer. And notice, because this layer was added to the top of my layer panel, it is hiding the two layers below it. Okay, if for some reason this layer was added below the mountains layer or below the white layer, don't worry, you can rearrange. Just grab from the right hand side and drag it up or down wherever it needs to go. We need this layer to be at the top right now, so drag it to the top of this layer window. We'll rename this Trees. Just double click in the text box and you can type in the new name. You can press return to exit out of the text box. With this trees layer selected, we're going to add a mask to this layer because we want to have our mountains layer become visible. Okay, so make sure your trees layer is selected. Navigate to the bottom of the layers window and click Add Layer Mask. Now you have this white mask. I'll press B to access my brush tool. Make sure that I'm using the same brush. I'm going to make sure my brush is black because my mask is white. If I paint it with a white brush, nothing will happen. Okay, so we're essentially painting onto the mask because we know our mask is selected. I know this mask is selected because I'm seeing white corners around the edge. If it wasn't selected, we'd see something like this. Okay, so just click on that mask to make sure it's selected. And then I'm going to just sweep my black paintbrush across the sky here. You can go back and forth. If it's not moving fast enough for you, just increase the opacity of the brush and it'll brush these things into view a lot faster. Okay, you can just sweep across the sky. And then if you're happy with the sky, by the way, if you want to change something, you don't want to see this mountain or something like that, toggle. Press X. You'll get a white paintbrush and you can paint these things away. Okay, so toggle, you can toggle back and forth between white and black. So black is going to be hiding the current layer, which is our trees layer. White will bring the trees layer back into view. As you hide with the black paintbrush on this mask, as you hide pixels in the trees layer, what will happen is the pixels from the mountains layer will suddenly become visible. I'm going to take my black paintbrush and just brush a little bit around here to add a misty quality. Remember we had created that mist in our mountains layer? So I'm just going to paint around here to add a little bit of mistiness around the bottom of this image as well. And again, if you overpaint, nothing to worry about, just press X and you can paint those pixels back into view if you're not happy with how you've painted out. Okay, and so we're just working on a mask. Why masks are so wonderful is just what you're seeing here. You can move between transparency and being fully opaque without deleting anything. So you can always go back to the original image. And you could even delete a mask if you're not happy with it by simply dragging it down to the tiny trash can in the lower right corner. So masks give you a lot of flexibility that you wouldn't get if you were erasing things from an image. Okay, so once you're happy with how these two images are developed together, which I'm pretty happy with this looks nice. The mountains give it a little more depth than the original tree image had. What we're going to do is we're going to add a figure to the foreground. So I'm going to keep this top layer trees selected, and then I'm going to navigate to my file menu. I'm going to select place linked, and I'm going to select my Kamakura Daibutsu photograph. Place it. It's going to end up kind of filling in the vertical space of my canvas, and I'm going to scale this up. Remember, I have Adobe 19, so I don't have to hold Shift while I do this, but if you have an earlier version, you need to hold Shift while dragging from a corner to scale this. You really don't want to see distortion when you're placing images. It sort of shows that you don't know how to use Photoshop. So always, always, always hold Shift, drag from a corner, and make sure it's scaling. It should not look like it's been distorted or pulled or squished. Once you're happy with the scale, press return. And we're going to add a mask to this layer as well. So let's rename this layer first. I'm just going to call this layer figure. It's a little easier to read that. And then keeping that layer selected, navigate down to the layers panel, Find the Add Layer Mask icon. That's the third icon from the left. It's the black circle in the white rectangle. Click on that one time, and you'll see that white thumbnail again. This time I'm going to still be using my black paintbrush, but I'm going to bring the scale of my paintbrush down a little bit, and I'm using the keys on my keyboard for this. So the shortcut key for increasing or decreasing a brush size are the left and right brackets. Those two keys can be found on your keyboard just to the right of the P. So I like using those because it's pretty fast. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by bringing the opacity of my brush up to 100%. Double check that my brush is black. Double check that my mask is selected. I'm going to quickly just paint the edges of this photograph because I don't want to see them. Okay. Once I get those edges out of the way, then I can bring my opacity down to 30 or 40%, and I'm just going to create a soft mask around the edge. It's okay if it has a little bit of a glow. I'm just going to create a soft mask around the edge of this figure, and you can decide how much of this architecture you want to keep in the image or not. I sort of just kind of make it fade away. So remember, you can do small clicks or you can do long brush strokes. That's totally up to you. And I'm just going to kind of keep the figure but hide some of this other stuff. Okay. Once I'm happy with masking out the figure, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's okay for it to be misty. We have that mistiness in the background. It can have a little bit of a glow. I'm going to move this figure. So to move it, I'm going to use my Move tool. V is the shortcut key. It's also the four-way arrow at the top of my toolbar. Okay, so I'm just going to move this down because I have that horse showing. And then what I'll notice is when I move it, I'm starting to see a little bit of an edge that I missed because it was scaled out of my canvas before. So I'll go back to my brush by pressing B on the keyboard, and I'll just paint this away so that I don't get any of these hard edges. So 100%, and just paint away that edge. Okay, so V for your Move tool, B for your brush. Okay, those are the two tools that we've used. All right, so now that we have our figure in place, and you can always pause the video if you need to spend a little more time masking it out. But now that we have our figure in place, what we're going to do is we're going to do some color adjustments. So I'm going to select this trees layer because actually I want my color adjustment to land above the trees but below the figure. So I'm going to select my trees layer, and I'm going to find my adjustments tab, which should be in the group above my layers window. Okay, my adjustments tab. And what I'll do is I'm going to select the hue saturation adjustment. And before we get started, adjustments are color adjustments. So each one of these icons here will define some type of color shift that you can control. Okay, hue saturation is color and how much color, right? Hue, saturation. So I'm going to click on the hue saturation icon, which is the first icon in the second row. When I do that, I'll see my hue saturation appear in my layer window. Now I had the trees layer selected, so my adjustment appeared just above the selection that I had. With my hue saturation created, I will see this properties window. Some people, depending on your workspace, your properties panel might be a pop-out that will appear sort of in this space here. I'm sorry. And mine is appearing here, which is fine, but I'm going to drag my layer down a little bit, my layer window, so you guys can see it better. So in my properties for my hue saturation, I'm going to simply select Colorize, And you'll see what just happened there. It essentially made the visible pixels below black and white and then applied a color over it. So that's what's happening. Adjustments adjust for any pixels below that are visible. For us, that's the pixels for the trees, mountains, and white layer. Okay, so keeping that hue saturation adjustment selected, I'm now going to adjust the hue. Now I already know what the hue is going to be. It's going to be 17. So I'm going to type that in here. Okay, and then saturation is going to be how much color, right? So you can go really extreme or really subtle. I'm going to go with 32. And then lightness, it is going to bring all your pixels closer to either white or black. You're going to find that lightness does not adjust for contrast. In fact, you're going to find lightness flattens your image a little bit. But you can use lightness if you want the background to look a little bit lighter, to sort of match that glow around your figure, or darker. Okay, I'm going to lighten it because I want it to, I'm really making an adjustment because I want these things to look like they belong together. So I'm going to bring my lightness up to say 16. Okay, so right now I have a hue at 17, a saturation at 32, and a lightness at 16. And it looks pretty close. We're really just trying to get all of our photographs to look as though they're in the same space. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding a little frame around the edge. So I'm going to keep my figure layer selected by clicking on it one time. And then I'm going to make a selection using my Marquee Tool. We haven't used the Marquee Tool, but it's at the top of your double column toolbar. Okay, remember you can make a single or double column by clicking on the double arrows in the upper left corner here. My rectangular marquee, and by the way, the rectangular marquee has actually a menu of other selection tools that you can use, but I'm just going to use this original rectangular Marquee Tool. M is the shortcut key. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a rectangle around my canvas. This looks pretty good. I'm just eyeballing this. If it really bothers you, you can hover over your selection. You'll get this sort of cursor with a white square next to it. That will allow you to move your selection. Okay, so if you want to move your selection, you can. Selections with these selection tools will always be indicated using marching ants. If you ever see marching ants on your page, that means there's a selection there somewhere, and you may not want that. Know that you do have a select menu. You can choose to select all. You can choose to deselect, meaning, hey, I don't like my selection, I need to start over. Use Command D for deselect. You can invert your selection. So let's say you build up a selection and you're like, actually, I want the opposite selected. You might want to invert it. Okay, so know that this select menu is here for you because sometimes it's a little confusing at first if you see a few marching ants on your screen and you're not sure what's going on. It might be a good time to deselect. Okay, so we have a rectangle selected on our screen right now. The pixels that are selected are currently associated with the figure layer. If I look at my layers window, here I'll bring this back up. Figures layer, because that's what's selected. And the pixels are inside of that rectangle. If I want the pixels to be selected outside of the rectangle, what I would do is I would invert it. And then you'll see kind of a double marching ants around it. So what I'll do is I'll keep this inverted for now. And now what we're going to do is we're actually not going to use this selection on the figure layer. We're going to use this selection on an adjustment layer. Remember, adjustments are all color adjustments. So I'm going to go to my Adjustment tab, click on it to bring it forward, and I'm going to find my Brightness Contrast Adjustment. That looks like a black and white sun. It's the first icon on the first row of our Adjustments window. I'll click on my Brightness Contrast Adjustment, and what will happen is that adjustment will be loaded above the layer that I had selected. So remember, I had that figure layer selected, so my brightness contrast landed above that. Now, when I look at my brightness contrast layer, I'm going to see that I have a thumbnail here. This is my adjustment mask. Now, we didn't think about masks when we were adjusting for our background color, but it also had a layer mask associated with it. It just happens to be that that layer mask was solid white. So everything on the layer was adjusting. All pixels basically on the canvas were being adjusted for hue saturation. With this new layer for brightness contrast, if I look at this thumbnail, I'm seeing that there's a black rectangle in the center and a white frame around it. That's because when we created that selection with the Marquee Tool and we inverted it, what we did was we selected all the pixels outside of the original rectangle. So all of these pixels where we're seeing this white space were part of our selection. When you have a selection on screen and you create an adjustments layer, by default, Photoshop loads that selection, those marching ants, into a mask for this adjustment. Okay, that's kind of important to know because otherwise it's really hard to build a mask that looks like a perfect rectangle using a paintbrush tool, which is what we've been using for the other masks, right? So you do want to know how to build masks using shape-based tools. And that's why I'm showing this to you, okay? So what's happening is we're not seeing any changes on our canvas yet because we haven't made any brightness or contrast adjustments. But if I go to my properties up here, okay, and again, you may see your properties pop out here. Just make sure that you have this brightness contrast adjustment selected and your properties should show up. Okay, I want to see my brightness and contrast slider. If for some reason you're not seeing it, just click back on this mask. Click back on this layer again and you should see those pop up as a selection up here. I'm going to adjust my brightness so you can see what's going on. And my contrast. Depending on what you want, you can adjust both of these. You can make your frame darker or lighter. So what's happening here is as I make my adjustments, the white space on my mask are the pixels that are being adjusted. Everything inside here is not being changed. Okay? Now, let's say I decided, I don't really want to adjust the outside edge of my picture. I actually wanted to adjust all these pixels inside here. Select this mask thumbnail, and there's a quick shortcut key. Because this mask is pure black and white, you can invert it. So Command I on a Mac or Control I on a PC will invert those pixels. And again, you make the selection using that layer window, not necessarily your canvas. Okay, so you can invert this. And then to invert it, then when you make the adjustments, it's adjusting for the inside. Okay, so you can choose either way. And if you're like, I really don't like the way that looks, I don't really want to adjust it like that, then feel free to invert it again. Right, that's totally up to you. How you want to create a frame. It's just important for me when you submit this file that I see that you know how to create a frame using that rectangular marquee and you are able to load it as an adjustment. And then also that you are able to find these properties to make the adjustment with these sliders. Okay, so there's a lot of things that you can do using Photoshop. Okay, so I think this looks pretty darn good. Now, if for some reason anything's looking funny as you go through this tutorial, remember that you can rearrange your layers. Okay, just drag them. I'd always grab from the right side of my layer and drag up or down if that's what I'm looking for. Remember, you can always delete something. So if for some reason you accidentally add the wrong adjustment or you don't like your adjustments, to delete, just drag the layer that you want to delete down to the tiny trash can at the bottom right-hand corner of your layers window. And then just remember that when you're working with masks, you add the mask, you double check your paintbrush, colors, opacity, hardness, okay, and you make sure that that mask is always selected. If the mask is not selected, what happens is your paintbrush will paint over an image, okay? So we don't really want that. You always want to make sure that your mask is selected if that's what you're working on. Okay? All right, so this looks pretty good. Let's export it so that you can submit it. So I'm going to navigate to my File menu, choose Save As, give this your last name, first name, week 1, exercise 1, and then I want you to change your format to JPEG, save this file, and the quality can be anywhere between 8 and 10, totally up to you. Say OK, and then submit that file. Okay, I look forward to our next demonstration. Hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial.